in the Black deafblind community. What are your goals? What are your dreams? What visions do you have for the future of your community? Autumn's raising her hand. Ashley says, go ahead, Autumn. Autumn here. Oh, I have so many goals, so many dreams. One of my main goals has to do with children. When they grow up, if they are deaf, blind, Black, whatever really, I want them to be taught deaf-blind culture, Black culture, traditions, values, make sure that they have access to all of that information instead of be exposed only to white adults and their culture and background and receiving misinformation about their culture. I want them to have full access to that. So that generational education is really important for folks to be able to develop a sense of identity, knowing who they are and where they're headed. And I don't want for them to feel disconnected from the folks that they see around them, not having Black deafblind people to look up to. I want them to be surrounded by peers and deafblind Black adults so they have that sense of connection. So being exposed to a culture, having that mutual love and respect, and developing identity, having traditions passed on to them. Ashley's saying, I agree. Ashley speaking, absolutely, Autumn. It's really important to teach children that generational knowledge, that, they are normal, their experience is natural as a deafblind person, for folks to, have that sense of identity growing up. And in addition, pro-tactile, I would like that to be taught in high schools as a foreign language and to meet that foreign language requirement, perhaps even at the college level. I would love to see that pro-tactile be used for everyone, not just folks that are deaf and blind. So for folks to be able to be exposed to that equal access to communication, to pro-tactile, I think that's what I envision for the future. And that's going to be the most important thing for the next generation in order for that generation to have it better than we did. So babies now need that exposure. We can give them that understanding, and then as they grow up, they will already have that knowledge, and they can go on and spread that knowledge, teaching even the next generation. So that's what I envision and what I hope for. And Autumn is raising her hand. Autumn here. I'd like to add something. I guess another goal that I have is to grow the interpreters that are available for the deafblind community. I mean, as often we see white interpreters that we feel disconnected from. So to see more people of color, there's such a high need for that. There's such a high demand within our community for us to have equal access from folks that we feel connected to. So I would love to see more people of color come into our communities as interpreters. Whenever I see a person of color show up to interpret for me, I'm so excited. I feel like we have that shared culture, we have a connection. And then when I have a white interpreter show up to work with me, I just feel disconnected. Like they don't understand my culture. They don't understand what it's like to be Black. So, sometimes in that moment, I just feel, when, the first time that I met a Black interpreter who was experienced with pro-tactile, I just felt, that interpreter was a good fit for me, and white interpreters haven't been. So I feel like that's a systemic issue that needs to be addressed. In order to have equal access, I need to have access to interpreters that understand me. So yeah, that's something that I feel like our society needs to improve in that way. Ashley is raising her hand. Ashley here, I'd like to add to that as well. Yes, a resounding yes, Autumn. More Black interpreters, more interpreters using pro-tactile, people that understand deafblind culture, they understand our language, where are these interpreters? I don't know where to find them. So that's something that has been a need for a while now, and often there are white interpreters that know tactile sign language but aren't aware of Black culture. So I would like to raise awareness of folks that are interpreting for people that are deafblind as well. And I'm an interpreter myself, and I am deafblind. So I would like to raise awareness that there are deafblind interpreters out there. I mean, who would be better to interpret for a deafblind person than another deafblind person? And there are people that look at me and think, you're deafblind? How does that work? How are you an interpreter? How could that be? And I tell them, I use ProTactile. I know ProTactile. I know how to translate American Sign Language into ProTactile sign language. Simple as that. I can interpret from ASL into ProTactile. That's my strength. So yes, I can be a deafblind interpreter for deafblind people that are using ProTactile. I can, and we can. And I want people to stop judging and making those, stereotypes about deafblind people. When I show up to interpret at a conference and I have a PT interpreter interpreting for me, people are asking, what are you doing here? Why are you here? And I, answer, I'm an interpreter. I make money, to interpret this conference. And people have more questions for me, but you're using an interpreter. And I say, yeah, okay. Like, you're using glasses. You're using a hearing aid. There's a person using a cane. There's no difference there. It's all about equality and equal access. Whatever I need to make sure that I can participate equally, that's what I'm going to do. And please respect that. That's all. And Autumn is nodding along. Coco speaking. All right. Wow. Once again, beautifully said. And what you said in terms of discrimination, oppression, absolutely. And really, the key thing here is thinking about that next generation. All of those isms that folks experience while they're being discriminated against for their various intersections. Thinking about those in a positive way. So if people experience discrimination or other isms, it breaks that human connection. People that have diverse backgrounds, whether it be Black, Latino, Asian, it's important to have an open mind when you're meeting people that are different than yourself. People are more than their various identities, and we should be thinking about intersectionality from a positive light rather than being critical when people are different. Thinking about the ways that we can support each other and connect as humans. I mean, there's really no place to judge or discriminate. And now, as we become older, we do have an opportunity to influence the next generations and to pass on the messages that we wish we would have had passed on to ourselves after, years and years of experiencing that same discrimination and feeling like there's no solution to that. Now is the time to change the script and teach the next generation. And really, you two hit the nail on the head. Thank you so much for how you've answered these questions. Really beautifully said. If there's anyone in the audience that has any questions for myself or Ashley and Autumn, now's the time for that. Looks like we've got, 10 or 15 minutes left here before we wrap things up. Are there any questions in the audience? Seems like we haven't gotten any questions yet. Coco speaking. If there's no questions from the audience, if either of you have anything to add, Ashley or Autumn, feel free. Autumn's raising her hand. Saying, all right, I'll take this opportunity to share with you a little bit about my experience. I mean, really, as I was growing up, you know, I had a Black family, of course, but didn't really know what it meant to be a Black person and how I saw myself and how other people's viewed me. One reason for that is because my skin is light. So that's one thing that affected me. And then my mom's family would tell me, you know, you're Black. And I would say, oh no, I'm mixed. You know, I'm half white. But later in life, when I entered Gallaudet in 2002, I met a lot of other people that were people of color that I could relate to. And somebody invited me to go to a deaf person of color event. And when I went there, that was really when I started to think more about my identity and realize that, right, I am a Black person. You know, it makes sense, all of these experiences that I've had. Socializing, you know, mostly with white people, white friends, and that really had an effect on me and destroyed my identity for a while. So I didn't have enough education or exposure to my culture to understand how to identify myself. I'm finally in a place where I identify as a Black person, and that didn't happen until I was 29 years old, which is kind of later in life. So now I'm doing what I can to be exposed to that culture and learn as much as I can, and in order to continue building on that identity. And like we mentioned, exposing children to their culture is another way that we can support them in building their own identities. So, you know, parents educating their children about Black history, Black culture, traditions, because, you know, I don't want people to have so much exposure to white people that they lose their identity or don't develop their identity. So that's why one of my goals is, or something that feels really, really precious to me, is to work with children in order for them to develop their identities.
Just one moment for the interpreter switch. Ashley raising her hand. Hi, this is Ashley speaking. Yeah, again, I totally agree with Autumn, 100%. Raising awareness and exposure to Black, deaf, blind people. Again, I've noticed myself in analyzing the way that my hearing loss journey has happened. But I didn't really admit to myself that I was deafblind because I didn't know other deafblind people out there. I didn't know how to communicate as a deafblind person. I didn't know. I didn't know how to do things. I was shy. I was scared. I just did not know. And I wanted to hide my deafblind identity because there was something out there that I wanted to be proud of. So I think it's really important to have exposure for youth, exposure for adults. And they need to know where deafblind people are, Black deafblind people, and exposure to that. We see so often deafblind people that aren't Black. Yeah, we see maybe people of color who are deaf and blind. But how often do we really get exposure to Black, deaf, blind people? Yeah, not too often. Not really too often. This is Coco speaking. it seems that you guys really have kind of a similar experience. And we've just got to provide that positive teaching for exposure to Black deafblind individuals. And my experience as a deafblind person, I had no idea. I was just raised in a mainstream school, just worked to be peers with my hearing peers, and I was taught to be equal. Until much later, I found out that I was diagnosed with Usher syndrome. And at that time, I was heartbroken. At that time, I'm supposed to be excited to go to college. I'm 17 years old. But in the moment, I was in shock. I'm blind? What does blind even mean? And what they told me is, yes, you're blind. And I thought, no, we've got to clarify here. Maybe I'm just understanding. Maybe there's something else going on here. And I wouldn't even sleep. I couldn't sleep. I was struggling with my own identity. And I thought maybe the doctor was wrong. There's no way that I could have Usher syndrome. There's no way. Till I started to grow older in age. And I started to notice a lot of changes in my vision. And then I went to Gallaudet. And I noticed I had a really good friend who had Usher syndrome, very similar to me. And we were good friends and just kind of supported each other along the journey. And that's when I saw the change in vision. With Usher syndrome and tunnel vision, I still thought I could see just fine, all was well. But really, it was my responsibility to teach in those moments. To accept that I am deafblind. And I'm still deafblind, regardless of the condition. And with my vision loss, now I'm still blind, and now I'm transitioning into full blindness, which I will at some point. But it's important that we teach children what deafblind really entails. Whether it could be their vision loss or their own identity. Whether they could have some loss of vision or full loss of vision. It's important that we teach that second generation. It's crucial that we emphasize the importance of access with the sign language interpreter, Braille, protactile, access to medical service, to legal services. Teach them that deafblind people are not necessarily disabled, and they're not all of the isms that people would think, or to be scared of, or to put up barriers towards. It's more about access and understanding intersectionality and the way that it works within the world. We have a long way to go, we really do. But we just gotta keep with the reins and keep with the challenges as deaf-blind youth in the future. Start to learn the important keys, just as today, during Black History Month, having two great speakers today. And my two people that I looked up to in the past, who were looking down on me until they passed away. And now looking at somebody who's very successful yes, and maybe they're deafblind and use oral communication, but still, there's a skill set there to be able to work hard and get a degree and master something. Each individual is different, and there's no judgment on deafblind individuals, because deafblind individuals vary. Well, I don't want to go off too much on a talk. However, with the last time that we have about 15 minutes left. And I want to ask the audience if you guys have any questions whatsoever. Any questions for Autumn or any questions for Ashley? Reading some of the chat. Looks like we have no questions, but we do have people saying, looks like we're asking for the interpreters to go ahead and check the chat. We're going to go ahead and check the chat room to determine what was said. One moment for an interpreter switch.
And someone has their hand up, is that right? This is Coco speaking. Yeah, please share your comment. This is Coco here. I'm calling on you, Lisa. Did you have a comment? Please go ahead. This is Lisa speaking, saying I have 2 questions. I'm curious, when you request an interpreter, do you typically request a Black or person of color interpreter? And my second question is, how often do you actually get that Black or person of color interpreter? Coco's asking, Ashley or Autumn, would you like to respond to Lisa's questions? Ashley's raising her hand and saying, quite often I actually don't request a Black interpreter. I just ask for an interpreter in general that knows pro-tactile sign language. And quite often the folks that show up to work with me are white. The only time that I really request specifically a Black interpreter is during events like this, during Black History Month. Sometimes people will ask me to give a presentation, and for those things, I'll ask for a Black interpreter to voice for me, someone that is aware of Black culture and kind of has that intuition and that can really sync up with me when they voice while I'm signing. And to answer your second question, how often do I get a Black interpreter? It depends, not often. Reason being, the unfortunate reality is I know that there are Black interpreters out there. I know that they exist. And, I don't know why I don't have them showing up for me. Sometimes even during Black History Month for those special events. And this is Autumn. I'm saying, yes, absolutely. I agree with you, Ashley. I know that there are many many Black interpreters out there. Yes, that's true. In my home state, I look around me and I don't think that there are that many available to me. Most interpreters in this area are white. So yeah, I really would prefer to have people of color interpreters. Um, I'll usually add that as part of my request when I request an interpreter, and then when they come to meet me, they're white. And I always think I'm hoping for a black interpreter, but it doesn't always happen. Sometimes just get their name, their experience level, whether or not they have certification, but it won't actually tell me how they identify. So I won't have any identifying information about that interpreter before they show up to work with me. So I'm not sure how to get more Black interpreters. I'm not sure how to answer that. And Ashley is raising her hand. Ashley speaking here. Yeah, I think some of the issue lies in when we're asking for protactile interpreters. Oftentimes, there aren't any protactile interpreters available, and that population is growing, but there's still not many. And then Black people that know protactile, there's even fewer. And my preference is protactile, so I'm stuck with what's available. Autumn's agreeing. And Lisa's saying thank you. And Coco saying well said. And Lisa, those two questions are, really important. So thank you for asking them. And, in some situations, we do just have to be flexible, whether we want to or not. I mean, and not only needing Black interpreters, but it's nice to have a person of color in general, however they identify. And we do need to be supporting Black interpreters to get training and become skilled in protactile. So, that could be like influencing interpreter curriculum in order to include that information. I do know many Black codas that are very skilled with language that might not have the support they need to become interpreters. So building that structure in order to support interpreters to gain skills in protactile and kind of creating the change in these spaces that we're talking about in order to foster that connection and respect. Was there a next question? Did anyone else have a question? Because we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left. Are there any more questions from the audience?
Hi all, my name is Aisha. I just have a quick question if there's time. I was wondering, I'm a graduate student, and a lot of the disability advocacy spaces that I go to, they treat issues of accessibility and issues of racism differently. And I would love to know if there have been spaces where you feel like these have been combined successfully and how those were done. Thank you so much.
Ashley's raising her hand. Hi, this is Ashley speaking. Recently at my doctor's office, specifically for my eyes, I did see those two things kind of come together and be addressed at the same time. Doesn't matter whether you're deaf or deafblind, they treat those issues as separate. They don't see them as one uniform identity. That's the way that they see things. But I've noticed they don't treat me differently. And I know I'm Black as well, and I'm female. And I don't feel like I'm treated differently there. And yeah, that depends on the space that you're in. I know in this particular place, when they first saw me, or when you first see me, you see that I'm Black. You don't see that I'm deaf. You don't see that I'm deafblind. So of course, you see my Black identity first. And I do experience discrimination from being a Black person first, and then from being deafblind. That's been my experience. And Coco's asking, Autumn, do you have anything to add? Autumn saying, yes, I do. Autumn speaking. Yeah, I agree with you, Ashley. Had a similar experience. The quickest reaction I get from people has to do with what they see first. You know, if I go for, you know, a job or an interview or to school, you know, I get those initial first reactions and have to explain how I identify based on, you know, being mixed race and deafblind. And sometimes people will cut me short and be like, okay, well, have a nice day. And that leaves me stunned of looking at them with this kind of awkward interaction. And I'm, you know, hoping to be there to build connections, and they kind of cut me off and keep things really brief. So yeah, I do feel like I experienced that discrimination and oppression based on these various identities. And yeah, sometimes it feels like that won't change. This is Coco speaking. Thank you for your question. That was an excellent question. I appreciate that you brought that up. Ashley and Autumn, once again, beautifully said. Um, yeah, I really appreciate your answers there. So it looks like we are almost out of time. So I want to say a sincere and heartfelt thank you to Ashley and Autumn. I appreciate you being here for Black History Month, Black Deaf Blind History Month, this celebration that we've had here together. I'm so happy that you could be here. And in addition, I want to say thank you to the leadership that was involved in supporting this event today. Also to Sima Space, Miles and team for handling the technology for today. There's many more people that I could say thank you to, but I will just say thank you to the team, the interpreters as well. Thank you for being here. Voice interpreters in addition, and deaf interpreters for working behind the scenes. I want to say thank you to my PT interpreters that are here with me as well. And we can't forget the captioners. Thank everyone for making this event accessible. And we'll be providing a transcription that will be printed out for Braille users as well. We want to make sure that this information is accessible to everyone. Once again, thank you. I hope I didn't miss anyone in my thank yous. And I want to say thank you for those of you in the audience who are here. I hope that you enjoyed this event. And, you know, Black History Month is traditionally in February, but really it doesn't end here. It's all year long, and we should, you know, celebrate our various intersections, whether it's LGBTQA, Latino, any people of color. That can all be wrapped up into this celebration, all of these various intersections to celebrate our human connection. So thank you so much for being here. And I'll be meeting the presenters afterwards in our other thread. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.